Welcome to STS Spooktober 2023. This is Hell to the King, our tribute to the works of Stephen King. This is Everything's Eventual. But first, a word from the author. One day, out of nowhere, I had a clear image of a young man pouring change into a sewer grating outside of the small suburban house in which he lived. I had nothing else, but the image was so clear and so disturbingly odd that I had to write a story about it. It came out smoothly and without a single hesitation, supporting my idea that stories are artifacts, not really made things which we create and can take credit for, but pre-existing objects which we dig up. The words of Stephen King. Once again, this is Everything's Eventual on STS Spooktober 2023. Part 1. I've got a good job now, and no reason to feel glum. No more hanging out with the Gumby heads at the Super Saver, policing up the cart corral and getting bothered by assholes like Skipper. Skipper's munching the old dirt sandwich these days. But one thing I've learned in my 19 years on this planet Earth is I don't relax. There are Skippers everywhere. Ditto no more pulling pizza patrol on rainy nights, driving my old Ford with the bad muffler, freezing my ass off with the driver's side window down and a little Italian flag sticking out on a wire. Like somebody in Harkerville was going to salute. Pizza Roma. Quarter tips from people who don't even see you, because most of their mind's still on the TV football game. Driving for Pizza Roma was the lowest point, I think. Since then, I've even had a ride in a private jet, so how could things be bad? This is what comes of leaving school without a diploma, Ma would say during my delivery Dan stint. And you got this to look forward to for the rest of your life. Good old Ma. On and on, until I actually thought about writing her one of those special letters. As I say, that was the low point. You know what Mr. Sharpton told me that night in his car? It's not just a job, Dink. It's a goddamn adventure. And he was right. Whatever he might have been wrong about, he was right about that. I suppose you're wondering about the salary of this famous job. Well, I gotta tell you, there's not much money in it. Might as well get that up front. But a job isn't just about money or getting ahead. That's what Mr. Sharpton told me. Mr. Sharpton said that a real job is about the fringe benefits. He said that's where the power is. Mr. Sharpton. I only saw him that once, sitting behind the wheel of his big old Mercedes-Benz. But sometimes once is enough. Take that any way you want. Any old way at all. Part 2. I've got a house, okay? My very own house. That's fringe benefit number 1. I call Ma sometimes, ask how bad her leg is, shoot the shit, but I've never invited her over here. Although Harkerville's only 70 or so miles away, and I know she's practically busting a gut with curiosity. I don't even have to go see her unless I want to. Mostly, I don't want to. If you knew my mother, you wouldn't want to either. Sit there in that living room with her while she talks about all her relatives and whines about her puffy leg. Also, I never noticed how much the house smells of cat shit until I got out of it. I'm never going to have a pet. Pets bite the big one. Mostly, I'll just stay here. It's only got 1 bedroom, but it's still an excellent house. Eventual, as Pug used to say. He was the one guy at Super Saver I liked. When he wanted to say something was really good, Pug'd never say it was awesome like most people do. He'd say it was eventual. How funny is that? Oh, the old Pugmeister. I wonder how he's doing. Okay, I suppose. But I can't call him and make sure. I can call my ma, and I have an emergency number if anything ever goes wrong, or if I think somebody's getting nosy about what's not their business. But I can't buzz any of my old friends. As if any of them besides Pug gave shit one about Dinky Earnshaw. Mr. Sharpton's rules. But never mind that. Let's go back to my house here in Columbia City. How many 19-year-old high school dropouts do you know who have their own houses? Plus a new car. Only a Honda, true, but the first three numbers on the odometer are still zeros. And that's the important part. It has a CD tape player, and I don't slide in it behind the wheel wondering if the goddamn thing will start like I always did with the Ford, which Skipper used to make fun of. The asshole mobile, he called it. Why are there so many Skippers in the world? That's what I really wonder about. I do get some money, by the way. More than enough to meet my needs. Check this out. I watch As the World Turns every day while I'm eating my lunch, and on Thursdays, about halfway through the show, I hear the clack of the mail slot. I don't do anything then. I'm not supposed to. Like Mr. Sharpton said, them's the rules, Dink. I just watch the rest of my show. The exciting stuff on the soaps always happens around the weekends. Murder on Fridays, fucking on Mondays. But I watch right to the end every day just the same. I'm especially careful to stay in the living room until the end on Thursdays. On Thursdays, I don't even go out to the kitchen for another glass of milk. When World is over, I turn off the TV for a while. Oprah Winfrey comes on next. I hate her show. All that sitting around talking shits for the ma's of the world. And go out to the front hall. Lying on the floor under the mail slot, there's always a plain white envelope, sealed. Nothing written on the front. Inside, there'll be either 14 $5 bills or 7 $10 bills. That's my money for the week. Here's what I do with it. I go to the movies twice, always in the afternoon when it's just $4.50. That's $9. On Saturday, I fill up my Honda with gas. That's usually about $7. I don't drive much. I'm not invested in it, as Pug would say. So now we're up to $16. I'll eat out maybe 4 times at Mickey D's, either at breakfast, Egg McMuffin, coffee, 2 hash browns, or at dinner, quarter pounder with cheese, never mind that mixed special shit. What dumb bulb thought those sandwiches up? Once a week, I'll put on chinos and a button-up shirt, and I'll see how the other half lives. I'll have a fancy meal at the place like Adam's Ribs or the Chuck Wagon. And all that goes me about $25, and now we're up to $41. Then I might go by News Plus and buy a stroke book or two. Nothing really kinky, just your usual like Variations or Penthouse. I've tried writing those mags down on my Dinky's dayboard, but I have no success. I can buy them myself, and they don't disappear on cleaning day or anything, but they don't show up, if you see what I'm getting at, like most of the other stuff does. I guess Mr. Sharpton's cleaners don't like to buy dirty stuff. Also, I can't get to any of the sex stuff on the internet. I've tried, but it's blocked out somehow. Usually things like that are easy to deal with. You go under or around the roadblocks if you can't hack straight through. But this is different. Not to belabor the point, but I can't dial 900 numbers on the phone either. The auto dialer works, of course, if I want to call somebody just at random anywhere in the world and shoot the shit with them for a while. That's okay. That works. But the 900 numbers don't. You just get a busy. Probably just as well. In my experience, thinking about sex is like scratching poison ivy. You only spread it around. Besides, sex is no big deal, at least for me. It's there, but it isn't eventual. Still, considering what I'm doing, that little prudy streak is sort of weird. It's almost funny, except I seem to have lost my sense of humor on the subject. A few others as well. Oh well, back to the budget. If I get a variations, that's $4 and we're up to 45. Some of the money that's left I might use to buy a CD, although I don't have to, or a candy bar or two. And I know I shouldn't because my complexion still blows dead rats, although I'm almost not a teenager anymore. I'll think of calling out for pizza or Chinese sometimes, but it's against Transcorp's rules. Also, I'd feel weird doing it, like a member of the oppressing class. I have delivered pizza, remember. I know what a sucky job it is. Still, if I could order in, the pizza guy wouldn't leave this house with a quarter tip. I'd lay 5 on him, watch his eyes light up. But you're starting to see what I mean about not needing a lot of cash money, aren't you? When Thursday morning rolls around, I usually have at least $8 left, and sometimes it's more like 20. What I do with the coins is drop them down the storm drain in front of my house. I'm aware this would freak the neighbors out if they saw me doing it. I mean, I'm a high school dropout, but I didn't leave because I was stupid, thank you very much. So I take out the blue plastic recycling basket with the newspapers in it, and sometimes the penthouse or variations buried halfway down the stack. See, I don't keep that shit around for long. Who would? And while I'm putting it down on the curb, I open the hand with the change in it, and through the grate in the gutter, it goes tinkle, 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 splash. It's like a magician's trick. Now you see it, now you don't. Someday, that drain will get clogged up, and they'll send a guy down there, and he'll think he won the fucking lottery. Unless there's a flood or something that pushes all the change down to the waste treatment plant or wherever it goes. But by then, I'll be gone. See, I'm not going to spend my life in Columbia City, I can tell you that. I'm leaving. And soon. One way or another. The currency is easier. I just poke it down the garbage disposal in the kitchen. Another magic trick. Presto changeo. Money into lettuce. You probably think that's weird, running money through the sink pig. I did too, at first. But you get used to just about anything after you do it a while. Besides, there's always another 70 falling through the letter slot. The rule is simple. No squirreling it away. End of the week broke. Besides, it's not millions we're talking about. Only $8 or $10 a week. Chump change, really. Part 3. Dinky's Dayboard. That's another fringe benefit. I write down whatever I want during the week, and I'll get everything I ask for. Except sex mags, as I told you. Maybe I'll get bored with that eventually, but right now it's like having Santa Claus all year round. Mostly what I write down is groceries, like anyone does on their kitchen chalkboard, but by no means is groceries all. I might, for instance, write down new Bruce Willis movie, or new Weezer CD, or something like that. A funny thing about that Weezer CD, since we're on the subject, I happened to go into Tunes Express one Friday after my movie was over. See, I always go to the show on Friday afternoons, even if there's nothing I really want to see, because that's when the cleaners come. Just killing time inside there because it was rainy and that squash going to the park. And while I was looking at the new releases, this kid asks a clerk about the new Weezer CD. The clerk tells him it won't be in for another 10 days or so, but I'd had it since the Friday before. Fringe benefits, like I said. If I write down sports shirt on the day board, there it is when I get back to the house on Friday night. Always in one of the nice earth tone colors I like. If I write down new jeans or chinos, I get those. All stuff from the Gap, which is where I'd go myself if I had to do stuff like that. If I want a certain kind of aftershave cologne or lotion, I write the name on Dinky's Dayboard and it's on the bathroom counter when I get home. See, I don't date, but I'm a fool for cologne. Go figure. Oh, here's something you'll laugh at, I bet. Once, I wrote down Rembrandt painting on the dayboard. I spent the afternoon at the movies and walking in the park, watching people make out and dogs catching frisbees, thinking how eventual it would be if the cleaners actually brought me my own fucking Rembrandt. Think of it. A genuine old master on the wall of a house in the Sunset Knoll section of Columbia City. How eventual would that be? And it happened. In a manner of speaking. My Rembrandt was hung on the living room wall when I got home, over the sofa where the velvet clowns used to be. My heart was beating about 200 a minute as I walked across the room towards it. When I got closer, I saw it was just a copy. You know, a reproduction. I was disappointed, but not very. I mean, it was a Rembrandt, just not an original Rembrandt. Another time, I wrote, autographed photo of Nicole Kidman on the day board. I think she's the best looking actress alive. She just gets me on so much. And when I got home that day, there was a publicity still of her on the fridge, held there by a couple of those little vegetable magnets. She was on her Moulin Rouge swing. And that time it was the real deal. I know because of the way it was signed. To Dinky Earnshaw, with love and kisses from Nicole. Oh, baby. Oh, honey. Let me tell you something, my friend. If I worked hard and really wanted it, there might be a real Rembrandt on my wall someday, sure. In a job like this, there is nowhere to go but up. In a way, that's the scary part. Part 4. I never have to make grocery lists. The cleaners know what I like. Stouffer's frozen dinners, especially that boil in the bag stuff they call cream chip beef, and Ma always called shit on a shingle. Frozen strawberries, whole milk, preformed hamburger patties that you just have to slap in a hot frying pan. See, I hate playing with raw meat. Dole puddings, the ones that come in plastic cups. Bad for my complexion, but I love them. Ordinary food like that. If I want something special, I write it down on Dinky's day board. Once I asked for a homemade apple pie, specifically not from the supermarket. And when I came back that night, around the time it was getting dark, my pie was in the fridge with the rest of the week's groceries. Only it wasn't wrapped up. It was just sitting there on a blue plate. That's how I knew it was homemade. I was a little hesitant about eating it at first, not knowing where it came from and all. Then I decided I was being stupid. A person doesn't really know where supermarket food comes from. Not really. I mean, we assume it's okay because it's wrapped up or in a can or double sealed for your protection. But anyone could have been handling it with dirty fingers before it was double sealed, or sneezing great big whops of booger breath on it, or even wiping their asses with it. I don't mean to gross you out, but it's true, isn't it? The world is full of strangers, and a lot of them are up to no good. I have had experience of this, believe me. Anyway, I tried the pie, and it was delicious. I ate half of it Friday night and the rest on Saturday morning while I was running the numbers in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Most of Saturday night I spent on the toilet shitting my guts out from all those apples, I guess. But I didn't care. That pie was worth it. Like Mother used to make is what people would say, but it can't be my mother they said it about, because my ma couldn't fry Spam. Part 5. I never have to write down underwear on the day board. Every 5 weeks or so, the old drawers disappear and there's brand new Hanes jockey shorts in my bureau. 4 3-packs still in the plastic bags. Double sealed for my protection. Toilet paper, laundry soap, dishwasher soap. I never have to write any of that shit down. It just appears. Very eventual, don't you think? Part 6. I've never seen the cleaners any more than I've ever seen the guy, or maybe it's a gal, who delivers my $70 every Thursday during As the World Turns. I never want to see them either. I don't need to, for one thing. For another, yes, okay, I'm afraid of them. Just like I was afraid of Mr. Sharpton in his big gray Mercedes on the night I went out to meet him. So sue me. I don't eat lunch in my house on Fridays. I watch As the World Turns, then jump in my car and drive into town. I get a burger at Mickey D's, then go to a movie, then to the park if the weather's good. I like the park. It's a good place to think. And these days, I've got an awful lot to think about. If the weather's bad, I go to the mall. Now that the days are beginning to shorten, I'm thinking about taking up bowling again. It'd be something to do on Friday afternoons at least. I used to go now and then with Pug. I sort of miss Pug. I wish I could call him and just shoot the shit, tell him some of the stuff that's been going on. Like about that guy Neff, for instance. Oh well. Spit in the ocean and see if it comes back. While I'm away, the cleaners are doing my house from wall to wall and top to bottom. Wash the dishes, although I'm pretty good about that myself. Wash the floor, wash the dirty clothes, change the sheets, put out fresh towels, restock the fridge, get any of the incidentals that are written on the day board. It's like living in a hotel with the world's most efficient, not to mention eventual, maid service. The one place they don't mess around with much is the study off the dining room. I keep that room fairly dark, the shades always pulled, and they've never raised them to let in so much of a crack of daylight like they do in the rest of the house. It never smells a lemon pledge in there either, although every other room just about reeks of it on Friday nights. Sometimes it's so bad I have these sneezing fits. It's not an allergy, it's more like nasal protest demonstration. Someone vacuums the floor in there, and they empty the wastepaper basket, but no one has ever moved any of the papers that I keep on the desk, no matter how cluttered up and junky looking they are. Once I put a little piece of tape over where the drawer above the knee hole opens, but it was still there, unbroken, when I got back home that night. I don't keep any top secret things in that drawer, you understand? I just wanted to know. Also, if the computer and modem are on when I leave, they're still on when I come back. The VDT showing one of the screensaver programs, usually the one of people doing stuff behind their blinds in this high-rise building, because that's my favorite. If my stuff was off when I left, it's off when I come back. They don't mess around in Dinky's study. Maybe the cleaners are a little afraid of me, too. Part 7. I got the call that changed my life when I thought the combination of Ma and delivering for Pizza Roma was going to drive me crazy. I know how melodramatic that sounds, but in this case, it's true. The call came on my night off. Ma was out with her girlfriends playing bingo at the reservation, all of them smoking up a storm and no doubt laughing every time the caller pulled B12 out of the hopper and said, "All right, ladies, it's time to take your vitamins." Me, I was watching a Clint Eastwood movie on TNT and wishing it was anywhere else on planet Earth. Saskatchewan, even. The phone rings. And I think, oh, good, it's Pug. It's gotta be. So when I pick up the phone, I say in my smoothest voice, "You have reached the Church of Any Eventuality, Harkersville Branch. Reverend Dink speaking." "Hello, Mr. Earnshaw," a voice says back. It's one I'd never heard before, but I didn't seem the least put out or puzzled by it. I was mortified enough for both of us, though. Have you ever noticed that when you do something like that on the phone, you try to be cool right from the pickup, it's never the person you expect on the other end? Once I heard about this girl who picked up the phone and said, "Hi, it's Helen, and I want you to fuck me raw," because she was sure it was her boyfriend. Only it turned out to be her father. That story's probably made up. Like the one about the alligators in the New York sewers. Or the letters in Penthouse. But you get the point. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, too flustered to wonder how the owner of this strange voice knows that Reverend Dink is also Mr. Earnshaw. Actual name Richard Ellery Earnshaw. I thought you were someone else." "I am someone else," the voice says. And although I didn't laugh then, I did later on. Mr. Sharpton was something else, all right. Seriously, eventually, someone else. "Can I help you?" I asked. "If you wanted my mother, I'll have to take a message because she's out playing bingo, I know. In any case, I want you, Mr. Earnshaw. I want to offer you a job." For a moment, I was too surprised to say anything. And then it hit me. Some sort of phone scam. "I got a job," I go. "Sorry." "Delivering pizza. he says, sounding amused. Well, I suppose if you call that a job. Who are you, mister? I asked. My name is Sharpton, and now let me cut through the bullshit, as you might say, Mr. Earnshaw. Dink? May I call you Dink? Sure, I said. Can I call you Sharpie? Call me whatever you want, just listen. I'm listening. And I was, too. I mean, why not? The movie on the tube was Coogan's Bluff, not one of Clint's better efforts. I want to make you the best job offer you ever had, and the best one you'll ever have. It's not just a job, Dink. It's an adventure. Gee, where have I heard that before? I had a bowl of popcorn in my lap, and I tossed a handful into my mouth. This was turning into fun, sort of. Others promise, I deliver. But this is a discussion we must have face to face. Will you meet me? Are you a queer? I asked. No. There was a touch of amusement in his voice, just enough so that it was hard to disbelieve. And I was already in the hole, so to speak, from the smart-ass way I'd answered the phone. My sexual orientation doesn't come into this. Well, why are you yanking my chain then? I don't know anybody who'd call me at 9:30 in the fucking night and offer me a job. Do me a favor. Put the phone down and go look in your front hall. Crazier and crazier. But what did I have to lose? I did what he said. And I found an envelope lying there. Someone had poked it through the mail slot while I was watching Clint Eastwood chase Don Stroud through Central Park. The first envelope of many. Although, of course, I didn't know that then. I tore it open and 7 $10 bills fell out into my hand. Also, a note. This can be the beginning of a great career, it said. I went back into the living room, still looking at the money. Know how weirded out I was? I almost sat on my bowl of popcorn. I saw it at the last second, set it aside, and plopped back on the couch. I picked up the phone, really sort of expecting Sharpton to be gone, but when I said hello, he answered. What's this all about? I asked him. What's the $70 for? I mean, I'm keeping it, not because I think I owe you anything, because I didn't fucking ask for anything. The money's absolutely yours, Sharpton says. Not with a string in the world attached. But I'll let you in on a secret, Dink. A job isn't just about money. A real job is about the fringe benefits. That's where the power is. If you say so. I absolutely do. And all I ask is that you meet me and hear a little more. I'll make you an offer that'll change your life, if you take it. That'll open the door to a new life. In fact, once I've made that offer, you can ask all the questions you like. Although I must be honest and say you probably won't get all the answers you'd like. And if I just decide to walk away? I'll shake your hand, clap you on the back, and wish you good luck. Where do you want to meet? Part of me, most of me, still thought this was a joke. But there was a minority opinion forming by then. There was the money, for one thing. 2 weeks' worth of tips driving for Pizza Roma. And that's if business was good. But mostly, it was the way Sharpton talked. He sounded like he'd been to school. And I don't mean at Sheep's Rectum State College over in Van Druzen either. And really, what harm could it be? Since Skipper's accident, there was no one on planet Earth who wanted to take after me in any way that was dangerous or painful. Well, Ma, I suppose, but her only weapon was her mouth. And she wasn't into elaborate practical jokes. Although, I couldn't see her parting with $70. Not when there was a bingo game in the vicinity. Tonight. Right now, in fact. All right, why not? Come on over. I guess if you can drop an envelope full of tens through the mail slot, I don't need to give you the address. Not at your house. I'll meet you in the Super Saver parking lot. My stomach dropped like an elevator with the cables cut, and the conversation stopped being the least bit funny. Maybe this was some kind of setup. Something with cops in it. I told myself no one could know about Skipper, least of all the cops, but Jesus. There was the letter. Skipper could have left the letter lying about anywhere. Nothing in it, anyone could make out, except for his sister's name. But there's millions of Debbies in the world. No more than anyone could have made out of the stuff I wrote on the sidewalk outside Mr. Bukowski's yard. Or so I would have said before the goddamn phone rang. But who could be absolutely sure? And you know what they say about a guilty conscience. I didn't exactly feel guilty about Skipper, not then. But still. The Super Saver's kind of a weird place for a job interview, don't you think? Especially when it's been closed since 8 o'clock. That's what makes it good, Dink. Privacy in a public place. I'll park right beside the cart corral. You'll know the car. It's a big gray Mercedes. I'll know because it'll be the only one there, I said, but he was already gone. I hung up and I put the money in my pocket, almost without realizing I was doing it. I was sweating lightly all over my body. The voice on the phone wanted me to meet him by the cart corral, where Skipper had so often teased me, where he had once mashed my fingers between a couple of shopping carts, laughing when I screamed. That hurts the worst, getting your fingers smashed. 2 of the nails had turned black and fallen off. That's when I'd made up my mind to try the letter, and the results had been unbelievable. Still, if Skipper Brannigan had a ghost, the cart corral was likely where it would hang out, looking for fresh victims to torture. The voice on the phone couldn't have picked that place by accident. I tried to tell myself that was bullshit, that coincidences happen all the time, but I just didn't believe it. Mr. Sharpton knew about Skipper. Somehow, he knew. I was afraid to meet him, but I didn't see what choice I had. If nothing else, I had to find out how much he knew and who he might tell. I got up, put on my coat. It was early spring then and cold at night. It seems to me that it's always cold at night in western Pennsylvania. I started out the door and then went back and left a note for Ma. Went out to see a couple guys. I wrote, "We'll be back by midnight." I intended to be back well before midnight, but that note seemed like a good idea. I wouldn't let myself think too closely about why it seemed like a good idea. Not then. But I can own up to it now. If something happened to me, something bad, I wanted to make sure Ma would call the police. Part 8. There are 2 kinds of scared. At least that's my theory. There's TV scared, and then there's real scared. I think we go through most of our lives only getting TV scared. Like when we're waiting for our blood test to come back from the doctor, or when we're walking home from the library in the dark, thinking about bad guys in the bushes. We don't get real scared about shit like that, because we know in our heart of hearts that the blood tests will come back clean, and there won't be any bad guys in the bushes. Why? Because stuff like that only happens to the people on TV. When I saw that big gray Mercedes, the only car in about an acre of empty parking lot, I got real scared for the first time since the thing in the box room with Skipper Brannigan. That time was the closest we ever came to really getting into it. Mr. Sharpton's ride was sitting under the light of the lot's yellow mercury vapor lamps. A big old Krautmobile, at least a 450 and probably a 500, the kind of car that cost $120,000 these days. Sitting there next to the cart corral, now almost empty for the night. All the carts except for one poor old 3-wheeled cripple safely locked up inside, with its parking lights on and white exhaust drifting up into the air, engine rumbling like a sleepy cat. I drove towards it, my heart pumping slow but hard, and it tastes like pennies in my throat. I wanted to just mash the accelerator of my Ford, which in those days always smelled like a pepperoni pizza, and get the hell out of there. But I couldn't get rid of the idea that the guy knew about Skipper. I could tell myself that there was nothing to know, that Charles Skipper Brannigan either had an accident or committed suicide. The cops weren't sure which, and they couldn't have known him very well. If they had, they would have thrown the idea of suicide right out the window. I mean, guys like Skipper don't off themselves. Not at the age of 23, they don't. But that didn't stop the voice from yammering away that I was in trouble. Someone had figured it out. Someone had gotten a hold of the letter and figured it out. That voice didn't have logic on its side, but it didn't need to. It had good lungs, and it just out-screamed logic. I parked beside the idling Mercedes and rolled my window down. At the same time, the driver's side window of the Mercedes rolled down. We looked at each other, me and Mr. Sharpton, like a couple of old friends meeting at the High Hat Drive-In. I don't remember much about him now. That's weird, considering all the time I spent thinking about him since. But it's the truth. Only that he was thin, and that he was wearing a suit. A good one, I think. Although judging stuff like that is not my strong point. Still, the suit eased me a little. I guess that unconsciously I had this idea that a suit means business, and jeans and a t-shirt means fuckery. "Hello, Dink. I'm Mr. Sharpton. Come on in here and sit down." "Why don't we just stay the way we are? We can talk to each other through these windows. People do it all the time." He only looked at me and said nothing. After a few seconds of that, I turned off the Ford and got out. I don't know exactly why, but I did. I was more scared than ever. I can tell you that. Real scared. Real as real. Maybe that's why he could get me to do what he wanted. I stood between Mr. Sharpton's car and mine for a minute, looking at the cart corral and thinking about Skipper. He was tall, with his wavy blonde hair he combed straight back from his forehead. He had pimples and these red lips like a girl wearing lipstick. "Hey, Dinky, let's see your dinky," he'd say, or, "Hey, Dinky, you want to suck my dinky?" You know, witty shit like that. Sometimes when we were rounding up the carts, he'd chase me with one, nipping at my heels with it going, "Rum, rum, rum," like a fucking race car. A couple times he knocked me over. At dinner break, if I had any food on my lap, he'd bump into me good and hard, see if he could knock something onto the floor. You know, the kind of stuff I'm talking about, I'm sure. It was like he'd never gotten over those ideas of what's funny to bored kids sitting in the back row of study hall. I had a ponytail at work. You had to wear your hair in a ponytail if you had it long. Supermarket rules. And sometimes Skipper would come up behind me and grab the rubber band I used and yank it out. Sometimes it would snarl in my hair and pull it. Sometimes it would break and snap against my neck. It got so I'd stick 2 or 3 extra rubber bands in my pants pocket before I left for work. I try not to think about why I was doing it, what I was putting up with. If I did, I'd probably start hating myself. Once I turned around on my heels when he did that, and he must have seen something on my face because his teasing smile went away and another one came up where it had been. The teasing smile didn't show his teeth, but the new one did. Out in the box room this was, where the north wall is always cold because it backs up against the meat locker. He raised his hands and made them into fists. The other guys sat around with their lunches looking at us, and I knew none of them would help. Not even Pug, who stands about 5'4" anyways and weighs about 110 pounds. Skipper would have eaten him like candy, and Pug knew it. "Come on, ass face," Skipper said, smiling that smile. The broken rubber band he'd stripped out of my hair was dangling between 2 of his knuckles, hanging down like a little red lizard's tongue. "Come on, you want to fight me? Come on, sure, I'll fight you." What I wanted was to ask why it had to be me he settled on. Why it was me who somehow rubbed his fur wrong. Why it had to be any guy. But he wouldn't have had an answer. Guys like Skipper never do. They just want to knock your teeth out. So instead, I just sat back down, picked up my sandwich again. If I tried to fight Skipper, he'd likely put me in the hospital. I started to eat, although I wasn't hungry anymore. He looked at me a second or two longer, and I thought he might go after me anyway, but then he unrolled his fists. The broken rubber band dropped onto the floor beside a smashed lettuce crate. "You waste," Skipper said. "You fucking long hair hippie waste." Then he walked away. It was only a few days later that he mashed my fingers between 2 of the carts in the corral. And a few days after that, Skipper was lying on satin in the Methodist church with the organ playing. He brought it on himself, though. At least that's what I thought then.
A little trip down memory lane?
Mr. Sharpton asked, and that jerked me back to the present. I was standing between his car and mine, standing by the cart corral where Skipper would never mash anyone else's fingers. I don't know what you're talking about.
It doesn't matter. Hop in here, Dink. Let's have a little talk.
I opened the door of the Mercedes and got in. Man, that smell. It's leather, but not just leather. You know how in Monopoly, there's that get-out-of-jail-free card? When you're rich enough to afford a car that smells like Mr. Sharpton's gray Mercedes, you must have a get-out-of-everything free card. I took a deep breath, held it, and then let it out, and said, "This is Eventual." Mr. Sharpton laughed, his clean-shaven cheeks gleaming in the dashboard lights. He didn't ask what it meant. He knew.
Everything's eventual, Dink, he said. Or can be, for the right person.
You think so?
No so.
Not a shred of doubt in his voice. I like your tie, I said. I said it just to be saying something, but it was true, too. The tie wasn't what I'd call eventual, but it was good. You know those ties that are printed all over with skulls or dinosaurs or little golf clubs, stuff like that? Mr. Sharpton's was printed all over with swords, a firm hand holding each one up. He laughed, ran a hand down it, kind of stroking it.
It's my lucky tie, he said. When I put it on, I feel like King Arthur.
The smile died off his face, little by little, and I realized he wasn't joking.
King Arthur, out gathering the best men there ever were. Knights to sit with him at the round table and remake the world.
That gave me a chill, but I tried not to show it. What do you want with me, Art? Help you hunt for the Holy Grail or whatever they call it?
A tie doesn't make a man a king. I know that, in case you were wondering.
I shifted, feeling a little uncomfortable. Yeah, I wasn't trying to put you down.
It doesn't matter, Dink, really. The answer to your question is, I'm 2 parts headhunter, 2 parts talent scout, and 4 parts walking, talking destiny. Cigarette?
Oh, I don't smoke.
That's good. You'll live longer. Cigarettes are killers. Why do you think people call them coffin nails?
You got me.
I hope so,
Mr. Sharpton said, lighting up.
I most sincerely hope so. You're top shelf goods, Dink. I doubt if you believe that, but it's true.
What's this offer you were talking about?
Tell me what happened to Skipper Brannigan.
Kablam.
My worst fear come true. He couldn't know. Nobody could. But somehow he did.
I only sat there feeling numb, my head pounding, my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth like it was glued there.
Come on. Tell me.
His voice seemed to be coming in from far away, like a shortwave radio late at night. I got my tongue back where it belonged. It took an effort, but I managed. I didn't do anything. My own voice seemed to be coming through on that same shitty shortwave band. Skipper had an accident, that's all. He was driving home and he went off the road. His car rolled over and went into Lockerbie Stream. They found water in his lungs, so I guess he drowned, at least technically. But it was in the paper that he probably would have died anyway. Most of his head got torn off in the rollover. And that's what people say. Some people say it wasn't an accident, that he killed himself. But I don't buy that. Skipper was... He was getting too much fun out of life to kill himself.
Yeah. You were part of that fun, weren't you?
I didn't say anything, but my lips were trembling, and there were tears in my eyes. Mr. Sharpton reached over and put his hand on my arm. It was the kind of thing you'd expect to get from an old guy like him, sitting with him in his big German car in a deserted parking lot. But I knew when he touched me that it wasn't like that. he wasn't hitting on me. It was good to be touched the way he touched me. Until then, I didn't know how sad I was. Sometimes you don't, because it's just, I don't know, all around. I put my head down. I didn't start bawling or anything, but the tears were running down my cheeks. The swords in his tie doubled, then tripled. 3 for 1. Such a deal.
If you're worried that I'm a cop, you can quit. And I gave you money. That screws up any sort of prosecution that might come out of this. But even if that wasn't the case, no one would believe what really happened to young Mr. Brannigan anyway. Not even if you confessed on national TV, would they?
No, I whispered. Then louder. I put up with a lot. Finally, I couldn't put up with any more. He made me. He brought it on himself.
Tell me what happened.
I wrote him a letter. A special letter.
Yes, very special indeed. And what did you put in it so he could only work on him?
I knew what he meant. But there was more to it than that. When you personalize the letters, you increase their power. You make them lethal, not just dangerous. His sister's name. I said. I think that was when I gave up completely. His sister, Debbie. Part 9. I've always had something, some kind of deal, and I sort of knew it, but not how to use it or what its name was or what it meant. And I sort of knew I had to keep quiet about it, because other people didn't have it. I thought they might put me in the circus if they found out, or in jail. I remember once, vaguely, I might have been 3 or 4, it's one of my first memories, standing by this dirty window and looking out at the yard. There was a wood chopping block and a mailbox with a red flag. So it must have been when we were at Aunt Mabel's out in the country. That was where we lived after my father ran off. Ma got a job at the Harkerville Fancy Bakery, and we moved back to town later on when I was 5 or so. We were living in town when I started school, I know that, because of Mr. Bukowski's dog, having to walk past that fucking canine cannibal 5 days a week. I'll never forget that dog. It was a boxer with a white ear. Talk about memory lane. Anyway, I was looking out, and there were these flies buzzing around at the top of the window. You know how they do it. I didn't like the sound, but I couldn't reach up high enough, even with a rolled-up magazine, to swat them or to make them go away. So instead of that, I made these 2 triangles on the window pane, drawing in the dirt with the tip of my finger. And I made this other shape, like a special circle shape to hold the triangles together. And as soon as I did that, as soon as I closed the circle, the flies, there were 4 or 5 of them, they dropped dead on the windowsill. Big as jelly beans. They were like the black jelly beans that take like licorice. I picked one up and I looked at it. But it wasn't very interesting, so I dropped it on the floor and went on looking out the window. Stuff like that would happen from time to time, but never on purpose. Never because I made it happen. The first time I remember doing something absolutely on purpose, before Skipper, was when I used my whatever it was on Mr. Bukowski's dog. Mr. Bukowski lived on the corner of our street when we rented on Dugway Avenue. His dog was mean and dangerous. Every kid on the west side was afraid of that white-eared fuck. Kept it tied up in the side yard, held staked out in the side yard is more like it, and it barked at everyone who went by. And not harmless yapping like some dogs do, but the kind that says, if I could get you in here with me or get out there with you, I'd tear your balls off, Brewster. Once that dog did get loose, and it bit the paper boy. Anyone else's dog probably would have sniffed gas for that, but Mr. Bukowski's son was a police chief, and he fixed it up. Somehow. I hated that dog the way I hated Skipper. In fact, I suppose it was Skipper. I had to go by Mr. Bukowski's on the way to school unless I wanted to detour all the way around the block and get called a sissy boy. And I was terrified of the way that mutt would run to the end of its rope, barking so hard that foam would fly off its teeth and muzzle. Sometimes it hit the end of the rope so hard it'd go right off his feet. Boing! Which might have looked funny to some people, but it never looked funny to me. I was just scared of the rope. Not a chain, but a plain old piece of rope. Just scared it would break one day, and the dog would jump over the low fence between me and Mr. Bukowski's yard and Dugway Avenue and rip my throat out. Then one day, I woke up with an idea. I mean, it was right there. I woke up with the way some days I'd wake up with a great big throbbing boner. I mean, it was a Saturday, bright and early, and I didn't have to go anywhere near Mr. Bukowski's if I didn't want to. But that day, I did want to. I got out of bed and threw on my clothes just as fast as I could. I did everything fast because I didn't want to lose that idea. I would, too. I'd lose it the way you eventually lose the dreams you wake up with, or the boners you wake up with if you're meant to be crude. But right then, I had the whole thing in my mind just as clear as a bell. Words with triangles around them and circles over them. Special circles to hold the whole shebang together. 2 or 3 of those, overlapping for extra strength. I just about flew through the living room. Ma was still sleeping. I could hear her snoring, and her pink bakery uniform was hung over the shower rod in the bathroom. And I went into the kitchen. Ma had a little blackboard by the phone for numbers and reminders to herself. Ma's dayboard, instead of Dinky's dayboard, I guess you'd say. And I stopped just long enough to gleep the piece of pink chalk hanging on a string beside it. I put it in my pocket and I went out the door. I remember what a beautiful morning it was. It's cool, but not cold. The sky so blue it looked like someone had run it through the Happy Wheels car wash. No one moving around much yet. Most folks sleeping in a little, like everyone likes to do on Saturdays if they can. Mr. Bukowski's dog wasn't sleeping in. Fuck no. That dog was a firm believer in Rudy Tooty, do your duty. Saw me coming through the picket fence and went charging to the end of its rope as hard as ever. Maybe even harder, as if some part of its dim little doggy brain knew it was Saturday and I had no business being there. It hit the end of the rope, boing, and went right over backwards. It was up again in a second, though, standing at the end of its rope and barking at its choky "I'm strangling, but I don't care" way. I suppose Mr. Bukowski was used to that sound, maybe even liked it. But I've wondered since how neighbors stood it. But I paid no attention that day. I was too excited to be scared. I fished the chalk out of my pocket and dropped down on one knee. For 1 second, I thought the whole works had gone out of my head, and that was bad. I felt despair and sadness trying to fill me up, and I thought, no, don't let it, Dinky, fight it. Write anything, even if it's only "fuck Mr. Bukowski's dog." But I didn't write that. I drew this shape. I think it was a Sancophyte instead, some weird shape, but the right shape, because it unlocked everything else. My head flooded with stuff. It was wonderful, but at the same time, it was really scary because there was so fucking much of it. For the next 5 minutes or so, I knelt there on the sidewalk, sweating like a pig and writing like a mad fiend. I wrote words I'd never heard and drew shapes I'd never seen, shapes nobody had ever seen. Not just Sancophytes, but Japs and Fouders and Mercs. I wrote and drew until I was pink dust halfway to my right elbow, and Ma's piece of chalk was nothing but a little pebble between my thumb and finger. Mr. Bukowski's dog didn't die like the flies. It barked at me the whole time, and it probably drew back and ran out the length of its rope leash another time or two, but I didn't notice. I was in this total frenzy. I could never describe it to you in a million years, but I bet it's how great musicians like Mozart and Eric Clapton feel when they're writing their music, or how painters feel when they're getting their best work on canvas. If someone had come along, I would have ignored him. Shit, if Mr. Bukowski's dog had finally broken its rope, jumped the fence, and clamped down on my ass, I probably would have ignored that. It was Eventual, man.
It was so fucking eventual, I can't even tell you. No one did come, although a few cars went by and maybe the people in them wondered what that kid was doing. What was he drawing on the sidewalk? And Mr. Bukowski's dog went on barking. At the end, I realized I had to make it stronger, and the way to do that was to make it just for the dog. I don't know its name, so I printed Boxer with the last of the chalk, drew a circle around it, then made an arrow at the bottom of the circle pointing to the rest. I felt dizzy and my head was throbbing, the way it does when you just finish taking a super hard test, or if you spent too long watching TV. I felt like I was going to be sick. But I still also felt totally eventual. I looked at the dog. It was still just as lively as ever, barking and kind of prancing on its back legs when it ran out of slack. But that didn't bother me. I went back home feeling easy in my mind. I knew Mr. Bukowski's dog was toast. The same way I bet that a good painter knows when he's painted a good picture, or a good writer knows when he's written a good story. When it's right, I think you just know. It sits there in your head and hums. 3 days later, the dog was eating the old dirt sandwich. I got the story from the best possible source when it comes to mean asshole dogs. The neighborhood mailman. Mr. Schermerhorn, his name was. Mr. Schermerhorn said Mr. Bukowski's Boxer for some reason started running around the tree he was tied to, and when he got to the end of his rope, he couldn't get back. Mr. Bukowski was out shopping somewhere, so he was no help. And when he got home, he found the dog lying at the base of the tree in the side yard, choked to death. The writing on the sidewalk stayed there for about a week, but it rained hard, and afterwards it was just a pink blur. But until it rained, it stayed pretty sharp. And while it was sharp, no one walked on it. I saw this for myself. People, kids walking to school, ladies walking downtown. Mr. Schermerhorn, the mailman, would just kind of veer around it. They didn't even seem to know they were doing it. And no one ever talked about it either, like, what's up with this weird shit on the sidewalk? Or, what do you suppose you call something that looks like that? A founder dim bulb. It was as if they didn't even see that it was there. Except part of them must have. Why else would they have walked around it?
To be continued. This has been the first half of Everything's Eventual, episode 4 of our 5-part Hell to the King series for STS Spooktober 2023. Make sure to tune in to episode 5 to hear the second half of the story. STS Spooktober was produced in collaboration with Stories Telling Stories and STS Media Group, writing you a personal letter at Milt House Studios in Milton, Vermont, casting around the globe to your frontal lobe wherever podcasts are found. Spooktober is also streaming on YouTube at Stories Telling Stories. Make sure to give us a review wherever you stream our show. We really appreciate it. You can show your support for free by following us on YouTube and Instagram. Help us get to 500 subscribers by subscribing to our YouTube channel, and if you so choose, going a step further and supporting us on Patreon for $1 a month or more. And until next time, stay spooky.